Hello, welcome back to Drunk Storytime with Quefish. I am Quefish. I am drunk. This is what I was drinking. It's, oh my god, I honestly did not even remember that this bottle was empty. It's Barefoot Bubbly, the limited edition 2020 Pride edition. I've been mixing it with Chambord because it wasn't, I'm probably just very unsophisticated palate, but it needed a little bit more. I'm going to need to get something else to drink for the rest of the evening though. Okay, so alright, so I am already drunk on the Barefoot Bubbly limited edition 2020 Pride stuff. And as everyone knows, if I'm deciding to be fancy, most of the time my fancy comes in the way of theme stuff. This is called Ballet of Angels, and I found it on the what is that fucking liquor store that Total Wine and More. I found it on their website. And because they deliver, guess what? I got it delivered. It was one of the, jeez, I'm already a bottle of wine in and I'm just fucking toast. Alright, so, and, fuck, and everything that I'm drinking also has a bit, like a shot of, Jesus, oh shit, I broke the cork. I broke the cork. I've never broken a cork, not in like 20 fucking years. Anyway. Everything that I'm doing is also with like a shot of Chambord in it. Let's try to get this fucking cork out. I haven't broken a cork in fucking years. Anyway, the story that I'm about to do is chapter 2 of The Last Battle by FancyTrinkets. And this is part 3 in the, pop. Oh, this is going to be absolute ass. And the Ineffable Autoerotica series, which is fantastic. I love it. Fuck. I'm sorry, now I'm trying to get the cork off my fucking corkscrew. It's Aziraphale finds an erotic audiobook, which is narrated by Crowley. Of course, Crowley figures it out. Aziraphale figures it out. But neither one of them know that the other one has it figured out. I am so nervous about this because it smells like fucking shit. Ballet of Angels is what it was called, because I go for theming if I'm not just drinking like straight liqueur. I'm not optimistic about that. Anyway, this is chapter 2. I have no idea what I've said up till now. I'm a bottle of wine in, and I'm like literally like 2 videos in to the evening. All right. So, explicit adult content. The Last Battle, chapter 2 by FancyTrinkets. AD 2008. Crowley had begun to consider his library human to be an acquaintance in addition to a strategic asset. They had helped him to find more than 20 books at this point. Without library human, he would have been far less efficient at creating audiobooks exclusively for Aziraphale to purchase. Library human did the research, offered book suggestions, remained calm under pressure, and, most importantly, refrained from asking questions or making assumptions about Crowley's personal life. "Hello, Anthony," Library human greeted him with a friendly wave. "I have a book." "Oh?" They set a slender paperback book on the desk and slid it towards Crowley. The title read, "Falling for You." "Synopsis?" Crowley asked. A pair of trapeze artists survive a fall and then fall for each other. Plenty of falling into bed as well. "Anything I should know about?" Library humans shook their head. "No character death and no betrayals." Wow, it's like AO3, no character death. "That'll work for me then." He checked out the book. It should be noted that Crowley did not actually have a library card. Furthermore, he rarely returned any of the books he borrowed. On the rare occasions he did, they were marked up with ink. Fortunately, no one could remember this about him, so the entire checkout process worked smoothly every time. "Oh, Crowley, you bastard." After leaving the library, he stopped at a patisserie to buy something sweet for Aziraphale, and then ended up at the bookshop a few minutes later. "I bought this," Crowley said in lieu of a greeting, "and then I didn't want it." Oh my God, that's perfect. "I bought this and then I didn't want it. I was going to throw it away, but I was in the area, so..." Oh my God. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I've done something kind of similar to that. "Hey, I bought this, but yeah, you can have it." He held out the bag for Aziraphale, who was pleased to accept it. Pleased to see him, and even more pleased that Crowley agreed to stay for a while and join him for tea. They spoke about a range of topics. Work, the state of the world, that time in 1973 when they'd accidentally shared a pastry laced with psychedelics, and everything had been swirly and terrifying for a few hours. They did not discuss the audiobooks. It had been nearly 2 years, and the topic of audiobooks remained a specter floating between them, which was fine. Crowley had hopes, not expectations. He knew that at some point they'd probably have to talk about it, but it hadn't come to that yet, and he wasn't about to rush into a conversation that Aziraphale wasn't ready for. He could be patient. So he kept acquiring library books, having friendly teas and lunches with Aziraphale, and then going back to his flat to record. What he didn't anticipate was the arrival of the Antichrist. Nor could he have predicted how much everything would change because of it. AD 2019. On the Monday morning after Doomsday failed, Crowley woke up alone. He was broken apart, utterly shattered into pieces, and he would probably never recover. But, and this was important, in a good way. He was lying in Aziraphale's bed, where last night the angel had fucked him until he lost track of every thought save those he could express with overwhelmed, ecstatic noises. Nice! After so many years of longing, he'd found relief, at last, in a powerful, transcendent orgasm that left him exhausted, barely able to move, and only dimly aware of the sticky mess of ejaculate. His own, smeared across his chest and belly, and Aziraphale's dripping out of him from where the angel had spent himself. Crowley didn't remember cleaning it up, so the angel must have taken care of him after he was sleeping. The thought left him all... The thought left him feeling all sorts of warm, fuzzy things demons were not meant to feel. So, that really happened, Crowley said. He knew for certain because of how sore he felt as he got up and stretched. No one else was in the room with him, but he kept speaking out loud anyway. There was no reason not to. It didn't matter anymore whether hell was listening or heaven had spies. They were on their own side now. And as it turns out, our side fucks. He said into the quiet room. I fucking love it. Our side fucks. It really had been better than he'd ever imagined. Things had started out slowly, but they'd swiftly escalated to passionate and unrestrained. He was hoping Aziraphale might return for another go. But in the meantime, Crowley looked around the room. He'd never been here before. The bedroom was small and crowded. Bookshelves lined the walls, and they were overflowing with vellum-bound manuscripts and rare old quartos? What's a quarto? Pause. What's a quarto? A size of book page resulting from folding each printed sheet into 4 leaves. 8 pages. A size of writing paper 10 by 8. What's a quarto? I don't know what a quarto is. Anyway, book. On one shelf, tucked away near the corner, he saw perhaps 2 dozen modern books. But no, Crowley realized as he stepped closer to read the titles. They weren't quite books, were they? These were something more familiar to him. He grinned to see them as he pulled a couple of them off the shelf. He hadn't thought about those in several years, not since the last one he made went unpurchased. He held on to them as he got dressed and then made his way downstairs. He found Aziraphale busy organizing a stack of papers on the desk. "Hey," Crowley said to catch his attention. Aziraphale stopped what he was doing and smiled. It was not his typical smile of, "Oh, there you are, Crowley, good to see you today." This one was much softer. "So," Crowley said, "last night, you think we'll do that again?" He was aiming for casual, but despite his best intentions, he was pretty sure he sounded desperate. Aziraphale came over to him and rested his hand on Crowley's shoulder. "If you'll allow it," he said, "I'd like to do that with you all the time." Not impressed. Crowley absolutely did not give his face permission to break into a bright, beaming, happy grin. But his face had plans of its own, and no matter what he tried, he couldn't thwart them. Aziraphale leaned in to press a gentle kiss to his cheek. "What have you got there?" he asked as he stepped back again. He'd noticed the books in Crowley's hand. It took Crowley a moment to respond. He was rubbing the place where the angel had kissed him. "Well," he said, bringing his attention back to the audiobooks. "This one looks like Carve My Heart." He remembered this one. It was about an ice sculptor and a delivery man. Originally a gruesome tale of desire and murder, Crowley had turned it into a sweet romantic comedy by switching all the crimes into dream sequences and adjusting character traits as needed. Oh my god, that's fucking funny. And here we have Broken Promises, Broken Legs. Is that the Nancy Kerrigan story? He held up the second book. That had been among Crowley's favorites. The one where the horse died. No doubt the author had intended it as a moment of heart-wrenching tragedy that brought the protagonists closer together. But in Crowley's reading, it had been more of an underwhelming, "Oh no, the horse didn't make it. So sad." The fiendish creature was soon forgotten as Crowley glossed over a full chapter of grieving and moved on to the comfort sex between the two main characters. Yeah, Crowley's not fond of he's not fond of horses. Oh, he didn't make it. Too bad. Sexy time. This is fucking funny. Oscar fears His riding days are over, Crowley said, echoing words he'd recorded years ago. But not if John has anything to say about it. Aziraphale's eyes went wide. Those... He pointed to the books and swallowed. Crowley watched, fascinated by the rise and fall of his Adam's apple. Those were hidden, Aziraphale said, his voice trembling. By miracle? Nah, Crowley said. Found a whole shelf full of them right next to the bed. Much better with Chambord. He said it with emphasis, because even thinking about the bed made him stir with arousal as he remembered all the things they'd done last night. The bed was definitely more interesting than these old audiobooks, but Aziraphale's surprised reaction was certainly worth interrogating. I wasn't even sure you'd kept them. What? Aziraphale said, and now he looked startled. After you'd ordered them from me. I'd hoped you were at least listening to them. Hard to be sure, though, since we never talked about it. What do you mean, ordered them from you? My internet shop. What? That was you? Of course it was me. Who else would it? Crowley shook his head, astounded. Honest Seller 666 was the name of the store. You mean to tell me you didn't know? I didn't linger on the details. It was all rather sordid. Crowley laughed. Sordid. Aziraphale, are you joking? I legitimately cannot tell right now. Last night you fucked me. That was loving, Aziraphale sighed. It was... All right, perhaps sordid was the wrong word. He was blushing, which Crowley found absolutely charming. He set down the books and reached for Aziraphale's hand. He wasn't about to let the angel get away from him before they'd sorted this all out. So, you listened to them? Of course I listened to them. Good, Crowley said. I mean, what a waste of all my talents if you hadn't. Aziraphale's eyebrows did that charming, puzzled lift, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. But then he said, My dear, are you saying you created those specifically for me? Crowley leaned closer. He held Aziraphale's hand with both of his, and he began to rub slow circles there with one of his thumbs. Obviously, Crowley said. The first one didn't even exist until you ordered it. But I wasn't running a real store. It was all a bunch of fake listings to waste people's time. But how on earth? My store received so much negative feedback you wouldn't believe. I had to set up a server-side miracle for the complaints alone. It converted them all into glowing reviews. Oh, this such brilliant transaction. He'd been proud of that, and he'd never been given proper credit. Hastur hadn't understood any of it, of course. And while he was certain that the part about servers would be meaningless to Aziraphale, the angel was a small business owner. As such, he had plenty of first-hand experience using miracles to make complaints disappear. That does sound clever. Aziraphale stepped closer, bringing his face merely inches from Crowley's. But you know, he said, his gaze flickering down to Crowley's lips, I was always very satisfied. It sounded suggestive enough that Crowley stopped thinking about his store and all the devious magic he'd come up with to keep it running. He raised an eyebrow as he noticed the way Aziraphale was staring at him. Care to tell me why you kept all those books on a shelf at your bedside? He had a pretty good idea already. Aziraphale simply confirmed it for him when the next words he spoke sounded rough with desire. I do enjoy the sound of your voice. Before he could say another word, Crowley kissed him. Nothing about it was tentative, and almost immediately Aziraphale opened his mouth. It felt wet and glorious, and it reminded Crowley just how much he wanted to drag this angel back to bed with him. But he still had questions, so he pulled away just far enough to speak. You stopped buying them. Why did you stop? It was everything with the Antichrist these past several years. Killed the mood a bit, didn't it? Crowley said. It certainly did, Aziraphale agreed. But also, I got to see you more often. I wasn't forced to rely on the fantasy. Crowley smiled to hear it. For so long he'd hoped that maybe, just maybe, Aziraphale thought about him when he wasn't around. And now, to have it confirmed, it was almost too much for his human heart to bear. Did I live up to it? To the fantasy? Oh, my dear, it's the fantasy that falls short. He pressed his hand to Crowley's chest, to the place above his heart. Although, he added, there is one thing I hoped you might indulge with me. Crowley was listening. This time, there wasn't a book to read or record. It was simpler than that. No elaborate devices required. And no clothing either. Whoa! They were naked, sitting side by side at the edge of the bed when Crowley began to tell the story. In the beginning, he said, they were meant to be adversaries. He turned to Aziraphale and kissed him. Gently, Crowley eased him backwards and guided him further onto the bed. If they'd followed the plot, they would have destroyed each other 6,000 years ago. With a hand on the angel's hip, Crowley anchored himself and knelt between his legs. He gazed into Aziraphale's eyes, watching him. The angel took a breath, audible as he drew it in, trembling as he let it out. Yes, he whispered, and kept his eyes on Crowley. Keep going. Crowley licked his lips. Aziraphale's cock was full and hard and right there for the taking. But he didn't take it yet. Neither of them liked the idea of smiting anything, so they had a conversation instead, he said. Not so bad, really. And pretty soon they were getting together to do other things. He moved his mouth closer. Like having lunch, sharing a drink, working together. All very friendly activities. Now it was time. He took Aziraphale's cock in hand and guided it into his mouth. Crowley sucked him deep, swallowing him to the back of his throat. His mouth was much too full and his eyes were watering, but he didn't mind the discomfort of it. Aziraphale's scent was heaviest here between his thighs, delicious and intoxicating as Crowley breathed it in. He kept going, stroking and sucking, listening to the soft murmured yeses and the incoherent, pleasured sounds that the angel made as he slipped closer toward the precipice of orgasm. At the end, it was clear that Aziraphale couldn't control how his body reacted. He bucked his hips, thrusting hard into Crowley's mouth. It might have hurt had Crowley not reacted quickly enough to make sure it didn't. Almost idly, he wondered if hell were paying attention to his miracles. He could scarcely imagine what they would think of this evening's list. 1 miracle to the principality Aziraphale's clothes, removing them. 3 to his own genitalia. Don't come yet, you idiot. And now a miracle to prevent Aziraphale's cock from slamming too hard against the back of his throat. All that, and the evening was just getting started. I love fucking sex miracles. I love sex miracles and audits of the sex miracles. With one more thrust, Aziraphale came, spilling himself thick and bitter. Crowley drank it all down and then pulled back to wipe away the last of it, which dripped from his mouth. He looked up at Aziraphale and grinned. Their friendship was a secret, he said, picking up the story right where he'd left off. He moved up the bed, coming face to face with Aziraphale, who reached for him, held him close, and said, "Imagine if we'd been doing that all along." "Oh, I absolutely did imagine it," Crowley said. That earned him an open-mouthed look of surprise from the angel, which only lasted a second before it settled into a pleased-looking grin. And then Crowley shook his head, not as part of the story, but because Aziraphale had taken his cock in hand and was stroking him. The angel had slicked himself to glide along his length and work him gently. It felt good. He was desperately hard, but he didn't plan to spend himself at the mercy of soft caresses. "Don't," he whispered. "I don't want to come till I'm fucking you." Those words had quite an effect. Aziraphale looked at him with desire overflowing from his bright, angelic gaze. His hand went still. "What are you waiting for?" he said, and shifted his legs, making room for Crowley between them. "They kept so many secrets," Crowley said, resuming the story. He sat back, lifting Aziraphale's hips and bringing himself into position for everything he was about to do next. They couldn't talk about the way it felt when their bodies were close, when their shoulders brushed, or when they passed a wineskin between them and their fingers touched. It was welcome and warm, with a spark there, like something electric. With a miracle, he summoned oil to his fingers and applied them to the delicate task of massaging Aziraphale open. Humans have their ways of being intimate, he said. Crowley was stroking his own cock, too, as he worked 2 fingers inside of Aziraphale, who continued to encourage him by rocking his hips and whispering to him, "Oh, my darling, yes." The demons saw them fornicate, Crowley said. It was strange what they did, and yet he wanted to know what it felt like to do all those same things with the angel. Despite his recent climax, Aziraphale's cock grew hard again. Crowley watched as it filled and thickened. He now knew exactly how it felt to have that fat, beautiful cock inside him. The memory of being spread open and fucked was compelling enough to require another miracle of the "don't come yet" variety applied to his own genitalia. He shifted position, aligning himself and getting ready for the way he wanted to do this. A mix of words and action so that the story and sensation would work in tandem and heighten the pleasure for both of them. He didn't actually think it would happen. Crowley moved his hips very gently forward. It wasn't a thrust. The head of his cock pressed against Aziraphale, but he didn't slip inside. Not yet. Instead, he kept talking. How could an angel ever want what he wanted? Crowley pushed very softly, dipping in just a little, then pulling out to press at his entrance again. What sort of angel would allow himself to be vulnerable? Yes, Aziraphale whispered. Please, please do that again. Crowley entered him again, pushing a bit further this time. What angel would let himself be taken by a demon? Aziraphale groaned, loud and wanton. Crowley rewarded him with several shallow thrusts before pulling out once more. Sex? No, surely that would never happen between them. Aziraphale canted his hips, attempting to bring himself more into contact, to fuck himself onto Crowley if only he could reach. With a hand on his hip, Crowley held him back. I won't tease you much longer, Angel, he said. Just give me a minute here. Aziraphale nodded. He sounded breathless when he answered. Oh, certainly. It does seem I'm rather desperate for you. Crowley petted his thigh to reassure him if he could. Back to the story, yeah? Yes, go right ahead. Crowley drew a deep breath and resumed. The demon was certain he wanted too much. He gave another shallow thrust, just a tease of heat and tightness before pulling out again. It was maddening to do this. He was torturing himself with his own restraint. But sometimes the angel looked at him like he was beautiful, like he was worthy, and it gave him hope. He made eye contact with Aziraphale and held that gaze long and steady as he tilted forward and sheathed himself deep inside. Crowley shuddered as he fought the urge to simply let go. Took a long time, he said. He started to move. not the fast way he wanted, but achingly slow. Almost too long. But they made it. They held hands at the end of the world. And the world didn't end. They saved it together. Well, Aziraphale lifted his head from the pillow. He was flushed and shaking, but he managed to laugh as he added, "Not sure they saved it." Crowley laughed and began to pick up the pace. "They saved each other anyway," he said. "They chose each other." "Yes," Aziraphale said. He began to move his hips, rising to meet each stroke. Crowley responded by fucking him harder. "They gave their bodies to each other," he said. He meant it in all possible ways. Exchanging corporations, having sex, and anything else they hadn't figured out yet, but might in years to come. And now they're here, in a bed, in a bookshop in London. "Yes," Aziraphale said. He was stroking himself in the space between them, his hand moving faster and faster. "They're making love," Crowley said, and he couldn't believe he was calling it that. It was enough to make the angel take the Lord's name in vain. Oh, God, they are. With one more cry, Aziraphale spilled his seed between them, and that was all Crowley needed. He released the final miracle of "Don't come yet, you idiot," which he'd been relying on for the past 5 minutes, or 45 minutes, based on this video. He thrust in deep and hard one last time and then let go. Relief and pleasure exploded through him, and the next thing he knew, Aziraphale was gathering him into his arms. Crowley looked up into that bright, smiling face, the one that had become so unbearably dear to him. "And the demon lived happily ever after," he said. "Oh, my dear, so did the angel." He's so fucking sweet and sexy and fuck. Oh, that was sweet and sexy and beautiful. Fuck. This was such a fun series. Alright, so that was chapter 2 of The Last Battle. I assume the last battle was between their, not like battle, but like the last battle of them. So, I mean, it's very sexy, but it's very sweet. I love it. This is part 3 of the ineffable audio erotica series, The Last Battle by FancyTrinkets. I'm going to be doing part 4 next. So, thank you very much for joining me. I know this is a long video, and I thank you so much if you actually listen to the whole thing, complete with my ridiculous commentary. So, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.